Well, good. Hello, let me formally welcome everyone. This is a National Press Foundation webinar on cybersecurity for journalists. I'm Linda Topping-Streichfeld, the Director of Programs here at the National Press Foundation, and I'm joined today by Trevor Timm of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He specializes in surveillance, free speech, and government transparency issues. He's also the co-founder and executive director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, and he has a JD from New York Law School. On Twitter, you'll find him at Trevor Timm, and he co-operates the Twitter account @drones, which reports on surveillance drones. For those of you who don't know us, the National Press Foundation is a nonprofit. We're based here in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to improve the work of journalists, both in the United States and around the world, especially on complex topics. All of our programs are on the record. We always encourage questions. Today, you can type your questions into the chat box, which you should see on the right side of your screen, and we will take them either as they come in or in the order they come in at the end of the presentation. We'll just see how that goes. And by tomorrow, we expect to have a link on our website to a recorded version of this webinar. So if you need to go back and check it or you want to forward it to a friend, you can do that. And if you registered in advance for the webinar, we will email a link to you. Also, if you find today's webinar useful and you'd like to support quality journalism, we encourage you to go to our webpage, nationalpress.org, and use the donate button that you'll find on our homepage. If you're tweeting today, we are at NatPress, and again, our guest is at Trevor Timm. So Trevor, we're going to talk today about a new tool that you hope is going to make it safer and easier for whistleblowers and other sources to get information to journalists. We have lots of questions about how that might work. I know you're going to get to them, but I wonder if first you can just tell us a little bit about how this tool was developed.
Sure. So the tool is called SecureDrop, and it's an open source whistleblower submission system that journalism organizations can install on their premises and accept documents and tips and information from whistleblowers in a much more safe and secure fashion than they normally would through normal digital channels like email. And this project's actually a couple years old, even though we just took it over 2 months ago. It was the project of the late activist Aaron Swartz, who was building this project in 2012, and in early 2013 he tragically died. But the project actually has lived on after him, and in March of 2013, the New Yorker installed the first version of this. Back then it was called Dead Drop, and for the next 6 months, the New Yorker was using it, but unfortunately the project kind of was stalled because there was no developers who could develop it on a regular basis, no one to fix bugs, make updates to problems that were a little hard to use for journalists. And so in August, Freedom of the Press Foundation formally took over the project. Kevin Paulson, the Wired's investigations editor, was managing the project before this and decided to give it a permanent home at Freedom of the Press Foundation so we could hire developers to continually update it, to make it more secure, to make it easier to use. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 2 months. And actually, in the coming year, we're going to start going out to media organizations and actually helping them install it.
That's really encouraging. Do you have some slides that are going to explain to us exactly how this works?
I think I can walk through exactly what the source will see if they come to a media organization's website that's using SecureDrop, and then also on the journalist end what they see and exactly why this is so important. So once I get this slideshow rolling here. So I think it's important to start off with why SecureDrop is really needed, because for decades sources and journalists have been getting together to share information about government or corporate wrongdoing, which has not come out through the proper transparency channels. And it wasn't until the last 6 or 7 years where sources were being actively prosecuted regularly for this exchange of information between journalists and sources. You know, for the first, since the Nixon administration, there was 3 prosecutions of leakers under the Espionage Act. And under the Obama administration, there have been 8, so more than double of all the other administrations combined. And part of the reason, or a large part of the reason that this is happening, is that the government realized that they don't need journalists to testify against sources anymore. You know, for decades, the big press freedom fight in this country was around reporters' privilege and journalists refusing to testify, even willing to go to jail to protect their sources. Well, the government figured out that they can subpoena emails and phone call records and figure out who these sources are without ever having the journalists testify. And so this is a big reason why there's been such a huge spike in sources being prosecuted. And obviously this chills reporters who are trying to gather news, and then chills the public's right to know. And so, you know, we've seen, beyond this crackdown on whistleblowers, we've seen these NSA revelations for the past few months, just showing how the government has just this vast surveillance apparatus that can basically capture anybody in its net that they want to. And on top of that, we've seen the actual source of these NSA revelations, Edward Snowden, actually go to journalists, pick journalists on purpose because they knew how to use encryption. You know, Glenn Greenwald talks about how he actually almost lost Edward Snowden as a source because he wouldn't set up encrypted email, and that Edward Snowden eventually went to Laura Poitras because she was savvy in this area and knew how to use encryption tools. And so that's kind of in a nutshell why we hope that media organizations will soon start using this type of technology. But so next I kind of want to go through exactly how this works and hopefully show you how easy it is to use on both ends. So for, you know, when this project first started about a year ago, it was very secure, but it was really clunky. So it was really hard to use for the source. It was even harder to use for the journalist. And it wasn't, nobody could use it unless they had a very technical background or a lot of training. And so we've tried to make it a lot easier while keeping the security very high. So I'm going to show you what the source sees when they go to a media organization that has this installed. They're going to basically go to the media organization's website. They will see what is known as an onion URL. And so an onion URL is something that can only be accessed through the Tor browser. And the Tor browser is something you can get at torproject.org. It is an internet browser that anonymizes your location. So it masks your IP address so that whoever is potentially monitoring what you're doing online won't be able to tell where this information is coming from. So because Secure Drop is only located on an onion address, it means that the source's identification, or at least location, will be anonymized. So this is exactly what they'll see on the screen when they first go to the Onion website. They'll get an option to submit documents, or to, if they've already submitted something, check for a response. So we'll just pretend that we're going to be submitting documents for the first time here. And here's the first page you'll see. You'll see that there is a 8-word code name here. This is just made up of a dictionary filled with thousands and thousands of words. You'll get 8 random words, and you have to either remember or write down this, and this will be your identification and your passphrase for getting in this service in the future. So if you ever want to see a response from a journalist, then make sure to remember this passphrase, and so you can sign back in. And so you know, this happens automatically, so you don't even have to do anything. You can actually make the passphrase longer if you want to make it more secure, but other than that, the system will just generate it for you. So then once you've taken care of that, you can hit continue, and here's what you'll see. As you'll notice, it looks pretty much just like a contact form on any website that you would normally go to. You know, it has a box for you to leave a message. The only thing it doesn't have is a space for your name or email address, which most contact forms do. You can also upload any files you want. And as soon as you hit submit right here, this will be sent through Tor, which is encrypted, to our server, the secure drop server, which sits inside a journalist organization. So a lot of times when I was talking before about the crackdown on whistleblowers and how the sources are being, or their information is being subpoenaed, it's usually being subpoenaed at third parties. So like Google hosts email, for example, or your phone company like Verizon or AT&T hosts your phone records. So a lot of times the government's going to these companies, and the journalists don't even know that their information is being taken until it's too late. So Secure Drop is located completely on the media organization's premises, so there will be no subpoenaing third parties here. If the government wants this information and wants to subpoena it, they're going to have to subpoena the media organization directly, and that means a huge legal fight. So as soon as it gets to the server, it's encrypted, and it'll sit on the server until the journalist wants to download it. So even if the server is attacked by a hacker, the document itself will still be encrypted, even if they somehow get in, which, again, we have many defenses up, so we hope that that's very hard, if not impossible. So they submit the file, and they'll just get a message saying, thanks, we received your message. And so they will go back later and check to see if the journalist responds. But so why don't we take a look at what the journalist sees on their side once this happens. The source has gotten their random code name, they've sent them a message, they've uploaded a document, and they've hit submit, so it's now sitting encrypted on the journalist's server. So the journalist will log into their own unique Onion URL as well, and this one will be private, so it'll only be accessible by the journalist. And what they'll see is a series of submissions. So what you see on the screen here is basically 6 different sets of sources or sample sources have submitted documents. And while the source sees an 8-word code phrase, on the other end, the journalist only sees 2 words, which is a completely different code phrase. It's just a random adjective and a random noun. And as you can see by the screen, some of them actually are pretty funny. So you can basically identify your source through this code name. And so you would click on the source that you want to see, and so the one that we just fake submitted is called non-negative portable, and so we will see what they have for us, and we'll click on their name. And once you click on their name, there will be an encrypted file which you can then click to download, and you will download this on a USB stick. You won't actually open it on the computer you are using right here. Instead, what you'll do is you will take it to what we call the secure viewing station. And this is a computer that is completely air-gapped. It'll never touch the internet. Actually, we even recommend taking out the hard drive. And you will put this USB stick in with this encrypted document, and you will also have a second USB stick with something that's called the Tails operating system. And this is this really groundbreaking project that is relatively new, which is an operating system that tries to do all of the operations encrypted by default, and it actually never touches your hard drive, so it just runs off the USB stick. And every time that Tails shuts down, it securely wipes everything that you have done. So you're using Tails to decrypt the documents that you're getting from the source, so you can use them in a safe place where it's not connected to the internet and nobody can try to steal them. But then also, if somebody is trying to trick you into downloading a file that contains malware, that means that if you decrypt it on the Tails operating system and you shut Tails down, then everything will be securely wiped and you'll be safe from all sorts of potential attacks that you would normally be vulnerable to if you were using this on your own computer. So once you actually get this to your air-gapped viewing station, you can then go back and respond to the source. So you can just write any message you want, click submit, just like a contact form on any other website, and there you go. And you can continually talk back and forth with the source through this method, and hopefully it will be a lot more secure than email and any other way that you can potentially contact journalists online. And so, it's important to realize that this is also a system that tries to log as little metadata as possible. So when we were talking before about the journalist information being subpoenaed, a lot of the time it's not even the content of communications. It's just the information about who you're contacting, when you're contacting them, for how long, how often, and all this information that gets logged by these third-party providers, SecureDrop isn't logging. So hopefully, even if the government comes after the media organization with a subpoena, there won't be anything there for the government to subpoena. So this will hopefully kind of restore the balance between privacy and security and allow journalists and sources to talk freely again like they have been for decades.
So let me clarify a couple of things. You mentioned the Tor browser, Tor project. Does any journalist who wants to use SecureDrop have to first install Tor?
Yes, Tor provides a lot of security. Both it will anonymize the location of the server and the people using the service, but it will also allow these files to go over the internet in an encrypted fashion, so they can't be intercepted along the way. Tor is actually very easy to use now. You can just go to torproject.org, download, just click download in the Tor browser bundle, and as soon as it downloads, you don't have to even install it. You just click on the icon and it just pops up. It looks exactly like a Firefox browser. And in fact, it's based partly off of a Firefox browser. So it's just like surfing the web on any other common web browser that you use, except that your location will be hopefully anonymized.
And do you recommend that journalists use the Tor browser all the time, no matter who they're communicating with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen over the last 6 months, if not 6 years, that it's really important for journalists to use all sorts of digital security tools. Tor is the most basic for them to use. You can run your email through Tor, or your chat browser, or your IM instant messaging client through Tor, just so if anybody ever collects the information about who you're talking to, at least they won't know where you are. There's other steps you potentially have to take, but Tor is definitely a great first step.
And to clarify, this is free, correct?
Yeah, the Tor project and the Tor browser bundle are completely open source, free software, which is free to modify and free to use.
Okay. Now, as you were describing the process, you also mentioned a USB stick, essentially that you would download the encrypted file on whatever computer you're using and then carry it over to this air-gapped computer on a USB stick. And you indicated that we shouldn't worry too much about the USB stick because the air-gapped computer is going to run directly off that USB. It's never going to touch the hard drive. Can you just clarify for people who've been hearing warnings for years about USB sticks that this isn't going to infect their air-gapped computer or create any other problems in their newsroom?
Sure. So I probably should have been a little clearer. There's actually 2 USB sticks we're talking about here. One will be the USB stick that you will use to transfer the encrypted file from the SecureDrop interface that we just looked at to the secure viewing station. And so on the secure viewing station, you're also going to have a second USB stick, and this is what's going to run the Tails operating system. It's just like Windows essentially, except it runs not on your hard drive but off of this USB. And every time you boot up Tails and use it to look at these, or to decrypt and look at all of these encrypted documents, every time you shut it down, it's going to securely wipe everything that happened unless you decide to save it somewhere else. So if you were potentially transferring malicious files or malware on the first USB stick that you had, and you plugged it into your secure viewing station, then the worst thing that can happen is you'll find out right there, and then you'll shut the computer down, and it will be securely wiped. And so you'll know that that file was contaminated, and you shouldn't use that. Now, there's definitely security risks with USB sticks in general, and I think it's important to recognize. And so we're going to have a set of best practice guides that go along with using these USB sticks and trying to explain to journalists exactly when to use them and when not to use them. It's actually much better if you use CDs or DVDs to transfer these files, because they're not rewritable. So that means it's very hard for once something's written on them once, then they can't be rewritten with malicious code. But unfortunately, a lot of computers don't even have DVD and CD drives anymore. So USB sticks are the only option. So you can take various precautions to make sure that nothing ever happens to your normal computer while still using this as securely as possible.
Got it. You mentioned also a passphrase that's used for the source to sign in before they drop their documents. And you said they need to write it down or remember it. If they forget it or they lose that piece of paper where it's written down, is this just like any other website where I can say, oops, forgot my password, can you give me a reminder? Or are they dead at that point?
No, unfortunately, they're dead at that point. That's part of the trade-off with these security tools, is that you're going to have to remember your passphrase, because there's no way for us to authenticate that you're the real person if you forget it. So without the passphrase, that's the only authenticator we have. So if you say, hey, I forgot it, we would have no indication that that's actually you, and so it would be insecure for us to actually try to give you that passphrase back. I mean, there are ways for you to recontact the journalist, so you could just generate a new passphrase and be like, hey, I lost my passphrase, I sent you these documents, and I'll prove it by telling you this thing that we were talking about that only we would know about. But unfortunately, if you forget or lose the first passphrase, you're going to have to start over again.
Right. We have a couple of questions coming in, and I think one of them is going to lead into something else we wanted to talk about. Well, one person asks, is Secure Drop free for all reporters?
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so SecureDrop is a completely open source project, and you will need to pay for the hardware. So, for example, you need to buy 2 servers, and you're going to have the secure viewing station, which can just be a laptop. But you can actually use old computers for these servers. They don't even have to be very powerful. You can just use it. I actually went to Best Buy and got the cheapest PC desktop they had available for like $250. You can also use an old laptop if you have these things sitting around the office. So you could potentially do it for free or very little cost. And all of the installation instructions are online. They're fairly complicated still, so you probably need somebody with technical background to help you install it at least. Once you have it installed, it's fairly easy to use. And we're working on making these installation guides easier to read, and also trying to automate some of the process. So hopefully down the line it will be, you just click a few things and all of a sudden it's installed. But that's a long-term process that we're slowly getting to.
Now, you said we are working on that. Are you talking about EFF or the Freedom of the Press Foundation?
Yeah, so this is I actually work at both places. So I'm an activist at EFF, but I'm also the executive director of Freedom of the Press Foundation. So this is a Freedom of the Press Foundation project. EFF's been actually very supportive of it, and but it's a Freedom of the Press Foundation project, and we actually hired a security expert to work on this full time. His name is James Dolan, and he actually developed this with Aaron Schwartz before he passed away. And James is the one that installed it at the New Yorker. He's also actually installed it at Forbes since then. And so he is basically the foremost expert on how to do this. And so we're going to be, in the next few months, we're actually going to be sending him around the country to journalism organizations to help them install it, to give them training, and to help out in pretty much any way, just so we can, start spreading this technology around and getting media organizations to use it.
Well, that's great. If a media organization is interested in having this kind of installation, who should they call? How do they reach out to say, put me on the list?
Well, there's a couple ways. First, you can go to pressfreedomfoundation.org/securedrop, and on that webpage we have a contact form which you could fill out. We ask you a couple questions, where, the media organization's name, where you're located, anything else you want to tell us. You can use that form, or you can actually just email me. I'm at trevor@pressfreedomfoundation.org, and just give me a little information about what you want to talk about, and we can hopefully get you on the way to being set up.
We have many viewers today from outside the United States, and I wonder, is it possible to help with installations for international media organizations?
Yeah, so we hope that we can eventually start traveling not only around the country but around the world to physically help people do this. In the meantime, we can help international people virtually, try to answer any questions or troubleshoot with them online. But unfortunately, we won't be able to physically be there for at least a while to help international organizations. But this is a project, again, that we want to make available to as many people as possible. And so if you can follow the installation instructions, then you can use SecureDrop no matter where you are.
Okay. All of this is obviously evolving. And one of the things that we're learning a lot about recently is how quickly hackers and the NSA are able to develop strategies to break encrypted code. How does SecureDrop stay ahead of that?
Well, first, we haven't really reinvented the wheel here. We basically took a bunch of different tools that we know work well and combined them and basically created a new product out of already existing tools. So Tor, for example, has been around for a long time, and the NSA documents released by Edward Snowden, at least the ones released so far, indicate that the NSA hasn't been able to systematically break Tor. And then we also use what's known as PGP encryption, pretty good privacy, which this is what encrypts the documents and while they sit on the server. So that even if a hacker were to completely get into the server and be able to take all of the documents, everything that he would take would be encrypted, and there would be no way for him to break that encryption. So we have a few layers of security here, and along with that, we want this information to stay on these servers for as little time as possible. So, we're not guaranteeing that this is unbreakable, especially by the NSA. Anybody who guarantees that their security product is NSA proof or 100% secure just isn't telling the truth. But what we do is try to mitigate a lot of the risks, or at least the common risks, that go along with these problems normally. So, for example, we're not logging any metadata. Another example is that when these sit on the servers, they're encrypted. Another example is that we actually encourage both the source and the journalist to delete messages after they've read them. So every time a source gets a message, they're prompted, it says, you should delete this. And so once they delete it, it deletes from the server. And if the journalist takes the documents that they want off the server and then saves them in a safe place that's not online, then they won't be accessible to hackers. And so we can really mitigate a lot of these risks just by using best security practices that we will try to teach the journalists along with helping them install it.
You mentioned saving it in a safe place. What about printing information? Can a printer be part of your secure setup in the newsroom?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you use the Tails operating system on your secure your air-gapped computer, you can connect it to a printer and print off the documents as well. The Tails operating system has all sorts of tools, so you can read these documents from PDF viewers to Open Office, which will allow you to read Microsoft Office documents, and all sorts of other file extensions.
Is there any encryption software or other newsroom security software or products that are being used out there now that are maybe not as safe as people think they are? Anything you'd recommend that people not use?
Well, I think you should always be careful when somebody, like I was saying before, when somebody promises you 100% security. The tools that I would stay away from, I don't really want to name specific names, but there's a few ways you can tell. Number one is the project open source. So what I mean by that is all their code for how they do this encryption available online for anybody to see or test. A lot of these proprietary software companies keep all of this information secret, so you don't know, or at least, maybe you and I might not know, but security experts won't be able to analyze their work and make sure that they're actually secure rather than being insecure or having somebody have installed backdoors in them. So open source projects are absolutely the way to go. There's some that I definitely can recommend. Actually, on Freedom of the Press Foundation's website, we're actually running a crowdfunding campaign right now for a variety of encryption tools that are being built by security experts that are open source. Tor Project being one of them. Another one is by a company called Open Whisper Systems. They make a free app on your phone called Red Phone, and then another free app called Text Secure, which allow you to easily text people and call people in an encrypted fashion. And we're also supporting the Tails operating system. And then there's a new project called Leap, which hopes to make email encryption easier. So there's definitely a lot of tools out there that you can download and try to use. But it's important to realize that there are a lot of adversaries out there, and these tools are very, very useful in stopping the mass surveillance that we've seen from the NSA over the last few months. The fact that they're collecting millions and millions of pieces of information a day and storing them in databases. But there are a lot of tools at the NSA's disposal too, and so if you ever become a target of an intelligence agency, it's very hard to avoid them. But stopping this mass surveillance is really one of the best things we can do, and hopefully these tools help us accomplish that.
I want to go back to something you said earlier and just clarify a little bit. You talked about the fact that using this software, anything that's going to be subpoenaed would have to be subpoenaed directly from the news organization as opposed to a third party like a Google or some other software. How is that helpful? Why is that better? As a lawyer, you could talk to us about that.
Sure. So let me give you an example. So, before these NSA revelations hit the newsstands in June, the biggest press freedom scandal was probably the fact that the Justice Department subpoenaed 20 AP phone lines without the AP ever knowing. And these affected over 100 journalists, and they were after one source. They ended up arresting and prosecuting a source under this in this controversy, and the sole reason they were able to do that was because they got these phone records. Now, part of the reason that AP was furious, besides the fact that they subpoenaed a huge number of phone lines that affected a huge number of journalists, is that the Justice Department guidelines supposedly said that AP should have had notice that this was happening, and that AP should have been able to challenge it in court before the phone records were ever handed over. Well, this didn't happen. The Justice Department got them anyway, got them without telling the AP, and the only time the AP found out was after the Justice Department already had them and had analyzed them. And so if we were to take that example and apply it to secure drop, this would never be able to happen if the sources were communicating over secure drop rather than the phone, because the servers would be owned completely by the media organization, so there would be no third party to subpoena. And so if the Justice Department ever wanted this information, they would have to subpoena the media organization directly. Now, there are all sorts of risks involved in this for the Justice Department. When media organization generally finds out that it's been subpoenaed, it will usually fight it all the way to the high court if the Justice Department keeps going. This will also drag in all sorts of other media organizations to protect and defend journalists' rights. And it's possible that beyond all of this, that's in secure drop, this metadata that the Justice Department is after won't even be available anyways, because it'll be either not logged or being regularly deleted. So it's a multi-pronged effort to try to stem the different problems that have resulted in the Justice Department deciding to subpoena this information from third parties.
Very good. That's really helpful. There's one question here which I think you've already answered, but we can go back to clarify. Does Secure Drop work with all Windows systems and all internet browsers? You've already talked about the Tor browser.
So if you are using Windows, you can use the Tor browser on Windows. You can just go to torproject.org and download it for Windows. You wouldn't be using Internet Explorer because that doesn't hide your identity, and so you would want to use the Tor browser no matter what operating system you use. But if you are using Windows, you can certainly download the Tor browser and use Secure Drop.
Okay, perfect. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, but if you're sitting out there and you have a question in the back of your mind, now is the time to type it in. Because if we don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap up pretty quickly. I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. When we do finish, you'll see a series of dialog boxes on your screen. And we hope that you will answer the questions in those dialog boxes, because those answers help us as we plan future webinars. I'd also remind you that at nationalpress.org, there is a button on the homepage that says Donate Now, and we really appreciate if you use that button and help us to help journalists around the world. One viewer asks, where can we find the new LEAK project? Is it LEAK or LEAP?
Well, so there's the LEAP project, which is an email encryption service. You can, if you want to donate to that project, you can go to pressfreedomfoundation.org, and there will be a link to their own webpage too. If you're talking about the LEAK project, the Secure Drop, that's also on our website at pressfreedomfoundation.org/securedrop, and you can learn all about it. You can donate to the project. Obviously this takes a lot of maintenance and upkeep, and so we're a nonprofit as well, and we could always use the help. But all of this information would be available on our website.
Okay. Is there any program that you recommend to secure and encrypt USB flash drive data?
That's a more difficult question. The way that Secure Drop works is they use PGP encryption to encrypt off of USB sticks. And there, a lot of people, even though that's traditionally a way for you to encrypt via email, you can also do it with documents and put them on USB sticks that way. And so that's probably a way people could do that as well.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and put up some dialog boxes on the screen. And I also, I see those boxes. Want to remind everyone that we have a third part of this series on cybersecurity. And I'm going to look to my technical team to remind me when the next date is. It is Tuesday, December 10th. So we look forward to seeing many of you back for that third installment. Trevor, thank you so much for being here today. This has been really useful. I'll remind everyone that you'll get an email with a link to the recorded version of this webinar, and we encourage you to share it with friends. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.